Hey, what's going on, everybody? Today we're going to do a little something different. We're not going to be opening any Pokemon cards today. We're actually going to be going over a console that kind of paved the way for other gaming consoles out there. It was one of the first consoles to use a game cartridge to actually put games on and plug into the console and use. The system came out in 1977 on September 11th. And there was one other console that came out a year before that, the Fair Channel F or something along those lines. That used game cartridges as well, but the 2600 was the one that really paved the way and made the game cartridges popular. Before they became popular with the 2600, most consoles used just a plug and play. You'd buy the console at the store, kind of like Pong. You'd go to the store, you'd pick up a Pong machine, you'd bring it home, it would have two paddles that were connected. You'd pull off the paddles, they'd have a line that connected probably to the back of the console, and you'd plug it right into your TV, and you'd have a Pong game on your TV you could play with, which was fantastic at the time. But the Atari 2600 just changed the game. You get different cartridges. You go to the store, you pick up your console, you bring it home. From what I've read, when you first bought the console, it came in a bundle. So you'd get 2 joysticks, 2 paddles, and then you would get your game that came with it. The first game that was packaged with it was Combat, and later on they changed that to Pac-Man, which was one of their pride and joys, really. Like I said, before this, you had your plug-and-plays, and then you could go to the arcade machine or the arcades and play on arcade machines, which I believe the Pac-Man on arcade machines was much better than the one that they created for the Atari 2600. I have the Pac-Man for Atari 2600, and I just think it's so clanky, especially with what they did for the arcades. The way that game played, it was so smooth. This one was just super clunky, and I'll throw a little gameplay up on the screen now. You can see that it's just a little clunky. It plays weird. You'd use your joystick, which was fantastic, but it was just really clunky. Sorry about that, a truck went by. And then they had other great games too, though. You had your Donkey Kong, fantastic. You're going up the levels and you're trying to save Peach. That's just a fantastic game. They have other great games, such as Space Invaders. I'm going to showcase a game that I have in my collection now that's kind of like Space Invaders, a little bit different, and it's actually one of my favorite types of that kind of game. Speaking of Space Invaders, it was actually one of the games that put the Atari 2600 on the map. The Atari 2600 came out in 1977, and they'd buy their Pong machines and they'd have them in their house and they'd play them every once in a while. But I don't think everyone was ready for an actual gaming console back then. And then Atari, they came out with their version of Space Invaders, and 3 years later, it took on. People started realizing, wow, this is really cool. You can have almost an arcade game in your house, and it was fantastic. They had different controllers you could buy for it. The way that the console looked just fit into the way that your normal 70s home would look. You put it on the shelf, and it looked great on there. And plus, all the games that they came out with it. I mean, kids were probably just going crazy. I mean, before, you didn't do much. If you did play a game, you had Pong. Atari 2600, you could go buy a couple games and you'd be entertained for hours. One of the games that I play, or that I have in my collection now that I've played, is Superman, and that game's super simple. You're Superman. You can go to the phone booth. You can get changed, flying around into different levels and saving people. I mean, it was just revolutionary for the time, and I think it's something that that I really wanted to go over on the channel to share with everybody. I mean, I never had an Atari 2600 growing up, but when I started collecting video games, I did make sure that I went out and bought one. I actually found mine at a local flea market. It was sitting on the bottom shelf of this guy's little setup that he had, and I asked him, like, how much? He's like, $10. Thank you very much. I had to get a controller for it. I had to get the paddles for it. and it was super dirty. It had kitty litter all around the outside and inside, so I actually wasn't sure if it was going to work. I took it all apart, cleaned it all up, and it works great. So let's get right into the system. We're going to go over my personal system, a few little details about it. We're going to go over some of the games that I have in my collection, some of my favorites, as well as some of the ones that I tried playing, haven't had any luck with. I think I need a different controller for those. I have a driving game that I don't have the driving paddles yet. I did pick up the normal paddles before I moved into my new home, but setting up the Atari 2600 isn't easy. So I had it set up at the old house. The new house I haven't had a chance to set it up yet, and I haven't had a chance to try the paddles. So there are a few games there that I haven't had a chance to play yet that I plan on breaking into very soon. And yeah, so go ahead, sit back, relax. We're going to showcase some Atari 2600 today. Alright, so one thing to note is the Atari 2600 had a pretty long life cycle. It had about 15 years that it was being developed for by Atari and other gaming companies. Actually, Activision's one of the gaming companies that came on the market or came on the scene when the Atari 2600 actually made game cards so popular. They started creating games for the Atari 2600, and they had some pretty good games on there. But one thing to note about the Atari 2600 was that it had different versions. So it came out with like the heavy sixer. It had 6 switches on the front. It was a heavier, thicker plastic. And then over in Japan, I believe it was Japan, they created a light sixer, which was a lighter plastic. Still had the 6 switches in the front. And then I believe in like 1980 they came out with a 4-switcher. So they put the difficulty switch, which the difficulty switch would actually change to different games. So like one cartridge could have like 5 games on it. So you just switch the difficulty switch and it would go to a different game. Or different games would have different difficulty levels, which is what that switch would also be used for. So like on the one that I have, they moved the difficulty switch to the back. So you have 4 switches up front, 2 switches in the back, along with your controller ports, which were put in the back. I believe they did that just so the front of it looked so good, or it looked good enough. It was so hard to sell a gaming console back then that they needed to make it look good on the shelves of the people buying it. And most of the time, parents were buying it for their kids, so it had to look good for the parents in their house, so their kids could have it and play it. I mean, they're not going to buy something that looks weird for a bunch of money that they're never going to touch, especially in the 70s. I guess the first thing we can go over is this guy here. I actually bought an aftermarket joystick. Now, if you find joysticks on like eBay for the Atari 2600, you might get lucky. You might find one good. I bought these guys here on Mercari, and these are the ones I haven't tried yet. And they're just like little paddles. They say paddle on the bottom. You can use them for different games. They have the buttons on the side. The spinner seems really nice, so I'm happy with this purchase. But a lot of the times, I mean, it's an old console, so if you're buying original stuff, unless the person really took care of it, which if they did, most likely they're not selling it. And if they are, it's going to be pretty expensive. So if you're buying stuff on eBay and it's not too expensive, you might get something that's just not going to work for you. So I went with Retrobit. They're so cool. I plan on getting a Retrobit controller for my Sega Genesis Mini that I just picked up. I mean, they do an amazing job over there. So this is what the controller will look like. Now it's basically the same as the way it looked back in the day. This is your controller port here. Kind of the same as the original Sega Genesis as well. You have your guy here, which actually is a really nice click from the Retrobit controller, and then you have one button here, which you would like shoot with. So if you're playing Space Invaders, you would move with this, and you'd press the button to shoot. I love this controller. I think it's really cool. I'm happy that Nintendo came out with the joypad, which is what we use today. I'm curious. I mean, we'll never know, but it would be cool to know what would have came out if Nintendo would have never came out with that. And that's going to be in another video to talk about. I am a complete Nintendo fanboy, so we'll definitely be doing a video on that. But moving on, we have the paddles here that I just showed you. Same thing. I mean, it has the same thing in the back. Now these paddles here, it seems they're it's like 1 and 2 player. So you plug it into the one, and then you have your paddles here. I'm not really sure. Like I said, I haven't had a chance to use these yet, but I'm very excited to. So let's move into the console. Let's take a look at the console here. So I keep my consoles all covered up with bandanas. I can go to Dollar General. I can pick up a bandana for $1. It adds color to your to your game room, and it keeps your console safe of like dust and stuff like that. I mean, you have your on these old ones, you have your cartridge spot, and it's just wide open most of the time. So it's just gathering dust, and if it's not open and it's got a flap, I mean, it's gathering dust on the top. You go to put the game in, and the dust is going to obviously fall in there, hit the game. It's just going to, I mean, if your console gets dirty, you have to clean it. But if you keep this on there, it gets a little less dirty. So let's take this bandana off here and take a look. So you can see here, it has the nice wood grain in the front, which would go with, really any 70s home, I guess, right? So it definitely fit in really nice. It had this really nice, sleek look. Really sexy. You got the Atari symbol right over here. As I said, I have the 4 switcher, so you have the 4 switches up here. You have on-off right here. Black and white or colored. So if you had a black and white TV, toss that down to black and white. Everything would be in black and white. And then you have your colored option there. You have your game select, which would also be, if the game has multiple games, you could also use that to do the game select. I know with the difficulty switch, it does change like the difficulty of games, or sometimes if there's 2 games on the cartridge, you can switch between the 2 using that. It really depends on what the developer of the game, had in mind when they created the game. And then you have the game reset, which when you're playing a game, you're messing up or whatever, or you mess up, you hit that, restarts the game for you. It's very nice. If we take a look at the back here, we have our power in the middle, we have our game ports over here, and then your difficulty switch. And then right here, there's not much, there's nothing there. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. I'm sorry. So we have your channel switch here. So between 2 and 3, you're going to need a coaxial for this. It's just like a little, it's about that big. I don't have it handy right now. As I said, we just moved into our new home, so that's probably why I don't have this hooked up yet. But basically, it's a little jack. So you plug the one side of the coaxial into the cord. So the cord is actually connected to the console. You would plug the coaxial, the one side of the coaxial, into, can we get that to focus? That right there. And then the other side of the coaxial would screw into the back of like your old TVs. That weird thing in the back of your TV where the wire would go into the hole, and then you'd spin it on and tighten it down. That's basically what that coaxial does. I'm not sure if there was a TV that allowed this back then. I'm not 100% sure, to be honest with you, but that's kind of what I had to do. I went on Amazon, picked up a coaxial, and hooked it all up, but everything worked fantastic on my old tube TV that I have. Next thing I want to take a look at is the game cartridge area. So it looks a little bit different than your normal game cartridge area, and we'll show you the game cartridges in a minute, and you'll kind of see how they would fit in there. But the card goes down into that little slot right there, and it just fits right on top of there real nice. There's not much to this. It's super light. When you open it up, there's just a board inside that has your little switches on there. Everything plugged into it. Nothing special at all. Just one simple board, and it was super easy to clean. You just you take the screws out of the bottom, take the top right off, and you're good to go. You're good to go. So I think that's enough about the console. Let's move on to some games. So as far as the game goes, I kind of got lucky. I went to a garage sale and I found this box. So this box is so cool. It's a little kind of like black. I don't think it's real leather, but it looks like leather. It's more like a plastic kind of thing. But on the inside it has these little slots, and they fit the Atari games so perfect. It was fantastic to find, and I actually just filled it up. So we got a lot of cool games to go over, a lot of games that I have not played yet just because I just picked them up, or like I said earlier, because I didn't have the paddles to actually play them correctly, so I couldn't play them. But I wanted to go over a few games that really are my favorite on the console, and then maybe go over a couple games that we're looking for at the end that we still want to add to our collection for this. Alright, so one of the games that actually, like I mentioned earlier, that really put them on the map and really helped them blow up was the Space Invaders. Amazing art on these cartridges as well, just so cool. And yeah, I mean, that really put them on the map. For this game specifically, you just need the joystick, the one that I showed you with the one stick and the button. You know, you're going back and forth, and you're shooting the little aliens that come out. Fantastic game. There is other games that were created that were like this. They just gave them a different name and maybe a little bit of a different gameplay. My favorite one out of all of those is this one here, Demon Attack. I'd have to say this is my favorite version of the Space Invaders kind of game. It's a fantastic game, very fun gameplay. As I said, I think it's more fun than Space Invaders, to be honest, but absolutely amazing. Plus, it's so cool looking. They did different things with the cartridges. Like, all cartridges can be made differently, so you have like your, we have the Bermuda Triangle here, a little bit different than this one, which is different than the typical one that you'd find. And then, you know, then you even have these ones here, the all-white Calico. Now, the Calico, they did create games for the Atari 2600, but they also came out with their own console later on. So when you're collecting, you're going to find games created by Calico that have these really cool cases on them. That was Donkey Kong, Carnival by Sega, actually. So this one was created by Sega through Calico, and this game's really fun too. It has a couple different games on it, and it's just a blast to play, especially on the Atari 2600, where the graphics aren't crazy or amazing, especially playing the PS4 now with the graphics being like absolutely blow your mind amazing. This isn't going to do this, but it's a lot of fun to spend some time with, and it really encompasses the, you know, you're playing a game. You know, you're not watching a movie, so I like that a lot. And another really cool thing about these is you plug them in and you play them. You know, like the PlayStation 4, the Xbox One, you're sitting there, you get a new game, and then you got to wait 5 to 10 hours for it to install. And then if you want to play another game and you run out of space, then you've got to delete a game and put another game on, and then it's just really annoying. And that's why I like these old consoles. Another game that kind of is like that Carnival game by Sega that I showed you is this one here, Circus Atari. You can see on this one that it says 1 through 8 Circus Atari, and that means there's 8 games on there that you can kind of blow through and see. Very, very cool. You know, one of the games that I have that I really want to play, seems a lot of fun, that I haven't been able to play yet because I don't have the driving paddle, is this game here, Dodge 'em. I heard it was a fantastic game. I was able to power it up on there, but the paddles that, or the joystick I had did not work. So I do plan on getting paddles for that, to play that. That's going to be a blast. I cannot wait. I would say one of the best games on the console, well, my personal opinion, one of the best games on the console is Turmoil. So I like this one too. It kind of shows you a little bit of the gameplay on the cartridge. So they kind of took a picture of it. Basically, you're a little ship. You move up and down the middle there. You can go down the sides to get things that might spawn that you need to power up. But also aliens could come down, or whatever they are. Spaceships come down those, and you have to shoot them. Very fun game. Incredible. 9 levels of play. Fantastic game. A couple games that we just picked up that I haven't had a chance to play around with yet. We have Kangaroo, which I'm not entirely sure what this game is all about. I saw the front of it and I was like, it looks cool, I gotta get it. So I'm super excited to try that game out. Another game that I'm super excited to play, since now that we have the paddle controllers, is Super Breakout. So Super Breakout, you're just a paddle at the bottom, the ball is bouncing, you gotta hit the ball, and you know, you hit the bricks at the top. Just a typical game, but I'm super excited to play it on the Atari 2600 with that paddle controller. I think it's going to change the way that the game feels, and I'm super excited to play it. Um, you know, one of the games that I mentioned earlier, actually two of the games that I mentioned earlier that came bundled with the 2600, the first one being Combat. So if you look at this one actually has tons and tons of games that you can play. You have 1 through 5 Tank, 6 through 9 Tank Pong, 10 through 14 Invisible Tank, 15 through 20 Biplane, 21 through 27 Jet Fighter. So you know you have tons of games on this thing, and that's the one that came you know, bundled with the console when it first came out. Then they moved over to this game here, which is Pac-Man, which I think has an amazing cover art on the front, and I was so excited to play this when I got it, and I brought it home and it was just so clunky. It really wasn't any fun. I mean, I have plug and plays that do much better than that, so I'm not a huge fan of that one. That's not my favorite version of Pac-Man, but really cool to have in the collection. Plus, the front of this just looks so cool, so cool. So, I mean, really, that's it. I mean, we do have a lot more games in here. Most of them, a lot of them, I haven't had a chance to play yet. That's so like one game that I did have a chance to play that was a decent amount of fun is Haunted House. So you're basically a little square. You're going through the house. You're trying to find things to help you get out of the house. Keys, you know, things like that. Open up new doors, and then finally you're able to get out of the house. I haven't been able to get out of the house yet, but definitely a fun game to play. Another one that's pretty fun is Defense. Pretty fun game as well. Just it's a fun console to collect for. It's so cheap. And it really encompasses, you know, it's got a lot of history behind it. You know, they're actually one of the main reasons that we had the terrible gaming crash was because they put so much money into E.T. Extraterrestrial, which I heard was a horrible game. I was gonna pick it up the other day, but they wanted like $9 for it, which isn't a lot for a video game, but I heard it was a horrible game, so I probably won't pay more than $2 or $3 for it, to be honest with you, if I do ever get it. But they ended up dumping so much money into that game, and they dumped a bunch of money into another game as well, which I think did a little bit better. I'm not entirely sure I forgot what that game was, but I know they dumped a lot of money into E.T. Extraterrestrial. And I think it was because that's around the time that the movie came out and everyone was crazy about the movie, but the game just didn't deliver, and it ended up really hurting them. I mean, as I said, they did have business, or they did, you know, create stuff for the Atari 2600 for 15 years, which landed them in 1992. But those games really caused a gaming crash. And I mean, I'm glad that they came out okay, and I'm glad that other consoles were built because of that, which today give us Xbox and Nintendo and PlayStation. But I'm interested. I'd be interested to see what would have happened if that didn't happen. You know, if we would have, if there would have been other people coming in creating things during that time, and people were actually buying them and using them, to see what other people would have created. It would have changed the way that gaming is today. But I'm happy with the way gaming came out today, so that's totally fine with me. But yeah, so I think that's it for today. I just wanted to kind of showcase my small collection of the Atari 2600, tell you guys a little bit of history about it, and you know, hopefully you guys can you know, maybe even if you don't want to pick up an Atari 2600. There's always different games for like PlayStation 2, you know, Xbox 360 if you're into those, where you can buy the Atari sets. You can go on and play the Atari games. I don't think it's the same thing. I think if you're going to play an Atari 2600 game, you're going to want to get an Atari 2600. That's the best way to play it. You get the cartridges, you get the cool paddles, you hook it up, you get on your little tube TV, and you start playing. Just an amazing feeling. As I said, I didn't grow up playing Atari 2600 or any kind of Atari at all, but you know, collecting it now is so much fun, and the games are a blast. I mean, you go on, you play like 5 to 10 minutes of a game, and you feel accomplished. You feel like you had a good time. It's really fantastic, you know. So that's kind of why I wanted to go over the Atari 2600 here on this channel. I do plan on going over some other consoles as well, such as the Nintendo Entertainment System, you know, the Super Nintendo, some consoles that I don't have yet that I still need to get, you know. So Thank you guys so much for watching this this little showcasing video of the Atari 2600. I really appreciate all the support that you guys have given us. We do have some more Pokemon opening coming soon. Don't worry. And we have some other cool videos coming as well. If you haven't seen the video from Christmas, definitely go check that out. It came up on January 1st. We put it up, and it was kind of like our little Croft Christmas adventure. So that was a lot of fun as well. Thank you guys again. If you like this video, hit that thumbs up button. Make sure you smash that subscribe button and hit that little bell notification so you're notified when we put up new videos. Typically, if we're doing Pokemon opening, we're going to have the little code cards in there for you to get packs online. So you definitely want to be one of the first people to see those Pokemon openings. Alright, so I have to go. The camera is about to die, so I will see you in the next video. Thank you.